You're probably asking yourself, why am I talking about a lens that's probably 5+ years old, if not 6 or 7? Every year, seems month to month, we get new lenses, new gear that comes out, and we all want the latest and greatest. As a wedding photographer, when I first started out 6 or 7 years ago, what was most important to me at the time was getting quality gear at an affordable price. So back 5, 6, 7 years ago, when I was shooting weddings professionally, I needed a lens where I could stand away from the crowd, stand away from the client, stand away from the bride and groom, give them some space. And I thought the lens that would be for me at the time was the SONY 70-200 F4 lens. At the time, this lens ran somewhere between $1,200 and $1,400, and it was a good alternative to the Sony 70-200 2.8, which at the time was going for about $2,200, the version 1 of the G Master. It's a little bit heavy, but if you compare it to the Sony 2.8 version, it's actually a little bit lighter than that lens. Autofocus, you get the manual focus switches, you get the optical steady shot, and it's super sharp, and the color that you got of this lens is kind of amazing. And I think at times we want the latest and greatest, but we sometimes fail to recognize that the tools that we already have at our disposal are going to work just fine. Several years later, as I continued shooting weddings, I started doing more fashion shows and different things. I determined that a 4.0 f4 lens probably wasn't going to do the job as far as being indoors with clients. I mean, yeah, you can bump up the ISO, and that typically does the job, but along came the Tamron 70-180. At the time, this lens, I think, was going for about $900, maybe $1,000, I'm not really sure. But as you can see, this lens doesn't have a whole lot of bells and whistles. It's pretty plain Jane. So this is actually, I still actually use this lens today. I take this on all of my weddings. It's kind of a plasticky lens, so I don't really have to worry about it getting damaged or messed up. It's been a workhorse, and for it to be actually made out of plastic, there's no visible wear and tear on the lens. I've never dropped it or anything, but there's no wear and tear. And this is actually a pretty good lens. But I bring this up because I was doing a studio shoot a couple of weeks ago, and I was with another photographer, and they were asking me, they said, hey, why don't you have the new 2.8 version? I said, because that lens is $2,700, and for the price of that lens, I could probably buy the new Sony a7 IV, or I could buy 2 lenses at that price. And, for the money, I think the 70-200 f4 is doing the job that I needed to do. These days, I mostly use this lens for my studio work, and typically I'm not shooting at 2.8 or 1.8 or 1.4 in the studio. Typically I'm shooting somewhere in the realm of f5, f6, f8 at times, depending on the lighting situation. And when you're in a studio and you're using backdrop with models, you're typically not trying to blur out the background. Typically you want the entire model in focus from her head to her toes, or his toes, and you're not really worried about blurring out the background. So for what I use this lens for these days, it does the job. In fact, I'd recommend anybody to go out and get this lens, because for studio work and outdoor shoots, this lens is going to give you exactly what you need it to do. Whether you're in a studio, whether you're outdoors and you need to control the situation, you want great autofocus, excellent colors, and a durable lens that's essentially half the price of the 2.8 G Master lens. I have 2 recommendations. I'd either go for the Sony 70-200 f4, or I'd buy the Tamron 2.8, depending on your budget. Now, if your budget you have a little bit more money in your budget, then I would never begrudge you not to go get the Sony lens. It is a phenomenal lens, so it wouldn't be a bad choice. As far as the 70-200 f4 is concerned, I've never had any issues with autofocus. The colors are always on point. The images are always sharp. It's a little heavy, but it's safe to say that this lens is probably the same weight as the 2.8 G Master version. What's the moral of the story? Well, the moral of the story is take that extra money, invested in your business, invested in your accounting software, invested in your tools like Photoshop, Instagram, Capture One, the administrative side of things, the editing. Or, invested in some prime lenses. If you do more than just weddings, you shoot portraits, you do landscapes. There's a lot you can do with $2,800 plus tax. Your budget allows, and you can go out and purchase new camera equipment and replace camera equipment, then go for it. My recommendation is, hey, if the gear that you have already is working for you, you're getting the images that you want to get out of it, you're making money, you're satisfying your clients, why spend the extra money if you don't have to? If something happens to that lens, then yeah, go for it. Buy a new lens and upgrade it. Anyway, that was my little rant for today. Hope it made sense. This is not an advertisement for this particular lens. It was just an example of how we can easily fall into the trap of running out to the store to buy new gear just because someone on YouTube or a friend has a new piece of equipment. Stick what you think is working for you. If it's not working, why change it, right? If it's not broken, don't fix it. Hey, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Join me on my journey as I go through wedding photography, portrait photography, fashion, and everything in between. I'm going to be sharing videos. I'm going to be sharing tutorials. I'm going to try my best to do this on a weekly basis. So follow your boy. Hopefully you'll learn something. Hopefully I'll learn something. Hopefully I'll get better at this YouTube thing. This is my first video, so hopefully there's more to come. Peace.